We're going to go ahead and start off with the NG 911 project update. We're really kind of at a standing point here with 124 PSAPs that have cut over to the EZNet since June of 22. We still have Northbrook left to cut right now. They keep kicking the target date, and now we're looking at March of this next year. And the ISP comm centers, which we're going to be moving over to the EZNet, their target date, same thing, has been kicked to March and April of 2026. Circuit work has been done. This really is an issue with their call handling equipment providers apparently not having resources to support this in a timely fashion. That's my editorial comment. The current version of the workflow tool is 5.1.0 that was released a week or so ago. We're going to talk just a little bit about that today. 125, systems are maintaining data in the hub. To date, only 22 of the systems, or 17%, have updated to the latest version, 5.1.0. It should be noted that 30 of the 911 systems are still using earlier versions of the workflow tool as early as 4.2.3, all the way up to 5.0.3. And those 30 need to update to the current version 5.1.0. The NG 911 workflow tool will no longer support versions of ArcGIS Pro beginning with 2.9, 3.0, 3.1, and 3.2. So if you have any of those versions, and I actually have reached out to you all, you need to move forward and upgrade. There is a new version of ArcPro 3.6 that's out. Again, that will depend on what your plans are, but at least you have to have 3.3 or newer. Going forward, the tool will only support the last 3 versions of ArcGIS Pro. And the reason these decisions are made is that as we move to a new release with new functionality, etc., Esri has to go back and test against each of the versions of ArcPro. So that's a lot of overhead and really a lot of cost to the project in order for that to happen. So this is the plan going forward, is that really just the last 3 versions will be supported. And that just means you need to try and stay up and keep up to date with the changes that are made, from that level. Here's a recommendation on service packs to keep in mind, is that you should always have the latest patch pack for the version of ArcGIS Pro that you're using if you're unable to upgrade to a higher release. And the thing to keep in mind about that is that you need to make this a manual exercise to locate the patch from my Esri website and to manually install it. Since if you try to just do it with ArcPro, hey, update me, it's going to install the latest absolute version of the Pro. So keep that in mind. It's a good, just like keeping your Windows version of software up to date. This too is a critical thing, because oftentimes, as you know, the patches will fix, problems large and small that you may be experiencing as you're working with ArcPro. All right, so we're going to have Mark Kiguchi. He's the section head at the Illinois State Geological Survey, is going to give us an update on the aerial project. So I am going to let him share my screen. I think I can. Guess I'm gonna. Let's see how this works, Mark. If you're able to get access.
Okay, right now you're still sharing, so.
All right, let me.
There we go.
Okay, try now.
All right, let's see what happens. Yep, it's allowing me to share, so perfect. Let me get this out of the way. And we will share this. Okay. Thank you. Everyone, I put my email in the chat in case you have questions or comments or need to get a hold of me, which I fully expect to happen. But I do wanted to at least provide you that so you know like where to go and you don't have to like email Cindy and bug her for things that you need with this. So we are happy to respond to you. The aerials, we have received all of them from the contractor, and we've looked at them and we've done our, you get a lot of the counties got to do their QA/QC if you wanted to. We did a bunch of our own, and we have begun providing them out there in a couple of different fashions. Eventually, we would like to get to the point where you have a single, like you want to download your entire county. That's what we'd like to get to, especially on something that is a little bit compressed, either JPEG 2000, Mr. Sid, or something along those lines. Right now, it is the original tile TIFF images, so they are quite large, but they are accessible to you in a couple of ways. This is the Illinois Geospatial Data Clearinghouse, which hopefully most of you are aware of. If you're not, the address is here at the top, clearinghouse.isgs.illinois.edu. If you do not, remember that, just Google search Illinois Clearinghouse. It'll probably be the first thing that comes up in Google.
And Mark, I'll update the slide deck. I mean, I have provided the information before, but I'll update the intro slide deck with that information and your contact information too. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. I'm just trying to get some things out of the way. There we go. So on the Clearinghouse, the data tab, I'm just going to do this because we're on WebEx and I don't want to start loading web pages if I don't have to. On the data tab, there's all the different things that you might be interested in, but if you are interested in imagery, there are all the different years, and down here at the bottom of the imagery is the 911 aerial acquisition. That is what was Cindy's project, and that is where you can go to find it. When you click on that, this is the page that comes up. The information about it and the metadata is there, where it came from, who's in it, different stakeholders, and then lastly, there is a viewer. Why does this? So on our viewer tab, this is what you're going to see. This is where you can get individual tiles. You can also pop this out into its own browser window, but you can get individual tiles. You will also get, and I'm going to actually go to the pop out window of it. I hope, there we go, because it's a little bit better, a little bit easier for you to see, hopefully. The lines that you see are the flight lines themselves. We did try to get the metadata for that so you knew when your area was flown. I clicked, we'll see how long, there we go. So what we get is the, sorry about that. When you click on a flight line, you are going to see the block that it was and the date that it was done and the imagery and whatnot. So that'll tell you, give you a date range for the area. You can see that as I've clicked, I've also got a whole bunch of other, it's one of 27. That's because I've clicked an area and I'm going to get probably a couple of blocks, and I'm also going to start, it's picking all the different aerials that are in that area also that you can toggle through and look at or download the image and the world file. So that gets you an individual spot if you're looking for that. Understanding again that we know you guys want to get your entire county or your entire PSAP area. In the meantime, one option for you all is to just contact me. I would say send me a hard drive because that's probably what it'll take based on the size of these things. And we can load it all and then send it to you so that you have them if you want them locally at the full resolution. We haven't, like I said, we haven't created county mosaics in JPEG 2000 or Mr. Sid yet. That's going to be next on our list. Right now, what we're working on, we put this up first for you so that you could get at the imagery if you needed it. And then the second part of this is to make statewide REST services so that you can just load it into ArcGIS on your own. That is not listed yet, but shortly, within a week, I would expect that when you are on this tab, there will be a tab on here that says services. So if I go back here and I'm just going to pick Bedrock Geology because I know what I'm going to get, you will see that there's a services tab there in addition to the viewer tab. And that services tab tells you where to go to find those services. The basic location of those services is And you see there's a whole bunch of stuff. So if you want to look at other things, have at it. It's all there. data.isgs.illinois.edu/rgis/rest/services. And under imagery, here are all the services for all the various imageries. You can see there's a bunch of older stuff. There's different counties and different years. We have a lot of imagery up there. We have all the NAPE imagery up there as a REST service for you to access if you're interested. But what you're most interested in, I think, right now is this section right here where it says Imagery Illinois Block 1 and 2025 on Block 4. What we are missing is Block 4 East. All the blocks have been loaded except Block 4 East. It is in the process of building as we speak. We were missing some data from the contract sponsor, or not contract sponsor, from the vendor. The vendor has sent us the information and we are loading it. So Block 4 East should be up within a week, and that will be the entire state. When you click on one of these, it will, oh, I should go back. Yeah, this right here is the link you would put into ArcPro when you say add data from a URL. This would be the URL that you put in. And if you just want to look at what the block looks like, I like the map viewer. And there we go. There's our imagery. And we can zoom in on areas. I just picked Peoria because it's close. And hopefully you can get an idea of the resolution. We did get 6-inch. This is just your regular standard RGB. We do have CIR supposedly available. So I will check through the data about how to release that. If you're interested in CIR, send me an email because I don't think that most people will be. But if somebody needs CIR, we'll get that for you separately. Right now, what we have are the, or you can just have to go in and load the data and change the bands yourself. But right now, what we have loaded in the REST service is the typical RGB, so it looks like real world. Okay. I think that's everything that I wanted to show or explain. So I will now give you guys an opportunity to ask me questions, or if you want me to show you something or go over something again, happy to do that.
Mark, do you think you can put that link that I was trying to do a screenshot and you moved too quickly, put that in the chat for me, and then I'll add that to the slide as well.
Great idea. Copy. Let me just get to the chat.
Yeah,
Where's
that
the
one
chat
I
when
got.
I'm sharing? There we go. So we have Clearinghouse, and we have probably where you want to be is this.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
I'm going to do all of them. Here's this one.
Perfect.
In case they're looking for other things. You never know. Whoops, come back. And since we are at this, I will throw this in there too. These are some of the applications. So, if you were looking at the LiDAR data through our applications, or if you're looking at our water wells or mining in your area, these are some of the links that are directly to the REST services that are for the applications that the ISGS has through the clearinghouse. So I'm going to throw that in there too, just in case there is something there that you want to go look at and play around with. But there's a bunch of other things in there that are separate from this particular photography with the PLSS application and everything. These are the REST services that are sitting behind it. They're open to the public, so you can play with them and build your own stuff on top of them if you like. There you go.
Perfect. All right, so I'll gather all that information and put it on Mark's slide. And are there any questions for Mark? So as soon as the rest points have been identified and are operational, Mark will let me know, and I can certainly share that out.
Absolutely.
If
And then I will start working on figuring out how to create some countywide mosaics for everybody to grab. And if you need that, like I said, please shoot me an email because I'll probably prioritize who's emailed me. Okay, no Peoria is first.
all right, any questions for Mark? This was good, Mark. It's always good to touch and feel the real thing.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, let me just see if we've got, let me just check to see if there was anything in the chat. Let's see what I've got in the chat here. Hold on. Okay, you put a couple things in the chat.
This hard drive
Somebody-
needs. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I'll have to figure out which county you are and grab them all and then see what size they are.
All right, so Jason from Peoria was asking about the size of the hard drive, so we know that that's probably going to be fairly large, I suspect.
I guess, and yeah, I just, because I'm dealing with both Peoria and Stark for our PSAP, I just wanted to make sure that I can kind of appropriately size, because I obviously am going to need more than a county, so.
Got it. Okay.
I believe that they sent the entire 75% of the state that we got came to us on 4 10-terabyte drives. Chad, is that what you got on your end too? Do you remember?
4 drives. They said 8 terabytes each, but I think that there's 2 terabytes on a drive. So,
Oh, okay.
I think that was the math, but it's been a while since I've looked at it.
Okay, so if we only had 2 terabytes of data on each drive, then
That'd be 8.
yeah, that would only be 8 terabytes in total. So yeah, like probably a 1 terabyte drive is probably plenty for a county or two.
Okay.
That'd be
Thank
my
you.
guess. Yeah, McLean County second. Crystal Oak said it was supposed to be private. We'll see. I got an email from Jefferson already, so you know, yeah, that's what I need. I need to get a priority list. So thanks.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. So, like I said, I'll go ahead and update the slide, and when the rest point information is available, we'll share that out. And then, you know, if you need anything additional, as Mark indicated, he's provided his email address. I'll update the slide so you have it handily in one spot, and then you can proceed with, you know, getting the data that you need. All right, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. All right, so Peter, do you want to take the slide, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can go over that.
Okay.
So the 5.1.0 tool was just released the other week. It does fix a token error that a few users were experiencing, and this was when you were attempting to upload to Intrado, I believe you would get a red text error and the process would stop. So this fixes that. Also, the tool is now capturing some metadata. We've done this in the past. The tool continues to record what projection you're using. It's now including the workflow you used, whether you're using the new or the legacy workflow, and also your Windows OS version. This helps us out at the back end, so we don't have to pester you with constant polls saying, "Hey, tell us what you're, doing with this or that." And it's already helped in that it's shown us that more people are at this moment using the legacy tool than the new tool, although there is a body of users using the new tool. So as all of you, and this is why Cindy keeps urging everyone to upgrade to the newest tool, some of it's because of this metadata. It'll help us in our discussions with Esri and help direct them, to put more work into the tool that people are using the most. There were some domain changes, so some of the hidden tables behind the scenes, agency name changes. Lake went to Lake.com, Hancock went to Hancock-Henderson, agency ID change as well for Lake.com. And then there were some other domain updates with incorporated municipalities. There were several adds, and then there was one delete, which I'm assuming must have been a misspelling originally. That's both in the incorporated municipalities and the MSite communities domains. Next slide. So a couple of known issues. We started to see some dangle issues where the tool wasn't marking all of your dangles as exceptions, the ones that it could, starting with Pro 3.5.2 and higher. When we did a test run at Western, it oddly left out a swath along the north and south of our test county, which was kind of odd. So be on the lookout for that. You'll just have to mark those as exceptions yourselves until we get that fixed. The other thing that we hope to get the tool doing here shortly, when a version change comes along, the tool is unable to delete the previous version of data that's on the hub, which means someone has to go in and manually clean that up. So we want to have the tools start doing that. The only caveat is that it only is going to work if it's the same user who submitted the last data set and the new data set. If that changes, you're probably going to run into some other issues. So if you're going to switch your user that's uploading, make sure you let Cindy know or Alicia know as well. Also, Renee, kudos to Renee. We had a big, I don't know why none of us caught this, but we'd like to have the tool, the legacy tool, auto-populate the input layer names. And duh, those layer names have been there all this time in the layer mapping table. So if you use that legacy tool, there's that one point where you're repetitively going through and picking the next layer. That to me is just lunacy. And I've been on Esri's case. Now I think it's like, duh, we should have been doing this all along. So hopefully we can get Esri squared away on that one. And then this just came in, there's a possible change detection error with a new tool for a couple of users, but we're awaiting some more data to try to work that one out and see what might be the issue. All right, next slide. So this is a presentation that Renee and I put together for the IPSTA conference a couple weeks ago down in Springfield. There is a lack of current data on the hub dealing with all the modifications that we've done to the tool. So Renee and I put this together to try to bring everybody up to speed and try to help you determine which of the tool flavors to use. Next slide. So granted, at the IPSTA conference, there were possibly 911 dispatchers and PSAT managers in the audience. You guys are primarily all data maintainers. But you might want to know if you're not actually actively maintaining the data, if you've got a consultant that's doing it, you might want to know what they're doing with your data. And if you're thinking, oh, maybe I could do this myself, this might help you decide otherwise. I don't know. But we're going to go through some of the requirements of the 911 data, help you look at each tool and determine which one to choose, and then how to handle errors confidently. Don't know if we'll need the full 60 minutes, but when Renee and I did this, we talked for about 60 and then answered 30 minutes worth of questions. All right, next screen. So just as a general reminder, if you're a data person and you've never really dealt with the 911 side of things, here's what happens. You dial 911, your call arrives at the phone company. And remember, over 80% of calls nowadays are coming from cell phones. So they have an XY coordinate embedded in that call signal. The phone company, GIS, takes that XY coordinate and it drops it through the PSAP polygon boundary to determine what public safety answering point actually should get that call. Now that's a change. In the old days, when cell phone towers were the location that determined where the call went. So if I'm up here in the suburban Chicago area, and this happened to me, I had a car accident in my own neighborhood, but there was an unincorporated cell tower right next to my neighborhood. So even though I'm in Mundelein, it was the Lake County Sheriff that answered the call. But I knew better and I said, I need to talk to the Mundelein police, and they transferred me. So this will help you get the call directed to the right PSAP right off the bat. It's going to route your call to the caller based on the caller's location, and it's going to cut down on those misroutes and transfers. Time is everything here, of course. So in Illinois, the Illinois State Police, Alicia and Cindy, they maintain the ArcGIS Online Hub repository. All PSAPs are required to submit data, and at this point, everybody has submitted data. And the data is also posted by the Esri tool to AT&T and Trado. Now, half of the state is covered by InDigital, and we are starting to work with InDigital as well. And hopefully future releases of this tool will also start submitting to InDigital. But remember, the state has a contract with AT&T and Trado, so we follow what AT&T and Trado does. That's why we are still following NINA version 1. AT&T and Trado is going to skip over version 2, and they're going to go with NINA version 3 when that's released, which we're guessing is going to be sometime in the first quarter of next year.
And that's the data model, Peter, correct?
Right, that's the GIS data model. There will be some changes. There were already some changes at version 2, and InDigital wants to follow version 2, but we had to tell them, hey, we're with AT&T, we're following version 1 at the moment. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there. But more on that in a little bit. Okay, next
And
slide.
we've also started to have, or at least got some notification from Comtech as well. And we'll be doing the same type of exercise to, let that submittal be pretty much a one-stop shopping as well. So those two projects are in the works.
Yes, and we put up the idea, what if we just gave each of these ESINet providers a statewide layer? And they kind of hemmed and hawed, said, it's probably better to do individual submissions. So most likely it'll be individual submissions, just like we do for AT&T and Trado for the other two. All right, so, and again, as a refresher, remember there are 7 Next-Gen 911 GIS layers. There's your provisioning boundary, and that is the outer boundary that governs your entire submission. Then your public safety answering point boundary, which may be the same thing as your provisioning boundary. It may also be broken up into smaller unit boundaries according to who's answering calls inside that area. Then you've got your 3 fire, law, and EMS polygon boundaries, and then your road center lines and your site structure address point layer. Okay, next slide. So the current tool is, as Cindy said before, is version 5.1.0. You download the tool using your ISP hub login. Save that zip file. This is important because if you have a problem running the tool, sometimes the advice is to, when you fix the problem, is to start fresh with a brand new copy of the tool. So our advice, save that zip file so that you have ready access to it. Once you extract the tool folder, there are a lot of files inside of there. There's some Python files, there are some CSV domain files. It's tempting to say, oh, my agency ID changed. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to change the agency ID in that domain and I'll be fine. Don't do that. Don't muck with those files. You start the process, either one, by opening the ISP NG911 data loading version 3.0.APRX. There used to be a 2.1 that has since been removed because we're no longer supporting things that are that old. Next slide. So which workflow do you use and when? So the legacy workflow, your input data does not need to follow the NINA spec. But you might also want to use the legacy workflow if you're a new workflow user, but you've made a large amount of changes. Maybe you annexed some new territory and brought in more center lines and address points, or surrendered some territory to a neighbor. So you've got a large amount of changes. At that point, you might want to use the new workflow for one run and then go back to use the legacy for one run and then go back to the new workflow. The new workflow, your data must follow the NINA data schema exactly. However, the caveat is with the new workflow, you get to submit 1 or 2 layers. You don't have to submit everything. The legacy workflow, you have to submit everything. And there's one gotcha with the legacy workflow. As you're going through that major pain point where you have to keep selecting your data layers, if you forget one of those 7 layers or think, oh, I'm just going to submit address points and road center lines, the legacy tool will wipe out your submission, your previous submission, and replace it with only the layers that you submit. Then you're going to get a call from Alicia or Cindy saying, hey, your submission is incomplete. Please run the tool again. So at the moment, the legacy workflow does not let you submit one layer. You have to submit everything. Again, guidance, if you're on the new workflow and you have a lot of changes, use the legacy workflow for one run and then go back to the new workflow. There are some steps that are going to be common to both workflows, and we'll cover those. So before running either tool, you want to make sure that you have ArcGIS Pro Standard or Advanced. This tool does not work with the basic license level. There are a few commands that it needs to run from the standard or advanced licenses. Find the best workstation in your office and run it on there. So this would be hopefully a modern computer with a solid state hard drive and ample memory RAM. And you want to make sure that you work from your local C drive. What that means is you put not only the project file on your C drive, but you have your output folder going to your C drive as well. And preferably, if you've got, let's say your data is based on shapefiles or a file geodatabase, have a copy of your master data on your C as well. The other caveat is, so you don't want it on a network server if at all possible. Now, granted, if your data is coming from SQL Server or Oracle, something like that, you don't have a choice. It has to come from there. But where possible, keep it local. Also, make sure that the folders you're running in are not cloud synced to either Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive or some other cloud solution, because the cloud solution is trying to back up your data as you're writing it. And Esri does a lot of writing back and forth to those folders. And if there's a lock by the cloud service, Esri will have a problem. Start early in the day, especially if you're a large county. It could take most of the day to process your data. Or even if you're a small county, but you've got a lot of updates, maybe it's been 6 months since you ran the tool, you'll want to probably start early to give yourself the most amount of time and hopefully finish in a day. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Renee now, who's going to talk about the legacy workflow part.
Okay, so for some of you, this is probably going to be a little bit of overview. Some of you have been using this for a number of years, but I know that there are some people on the call who are newer to being a data maintainer. So just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, everybody understands what the legacy workflow is doing before we talk about the new workflow in comparison. So just to start off, just an overview of what the legacy workflow is going to be doing. So it starts off with using a layer mapping and domain mapping table. And those are going to help the tool convert your data into the standard format. If you are already in the standard format, you can still use the legacy workflow. You're just going to kind of skip some of that more technical stuff at the beginning. As Peter mentioned, you do need to upload all 7 of the required layers to the hub each time if you're using the legacy workflow. Once you've got those all loaded into the standard format, the tool is going to run some error checks. You'll be able to correct some of those errors, revalidate your corrections. Once you've got it to a point where you've got a small amount of errors, then you'll be able to submit it to the hub and the ESInet provider. Again, if you're Intrado, it will automatically upload that to Intrado as well, and the other 2 ESInet providers we're still in the works on. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so getting started with the legacy tool, as Peter mentioned, this is a change from, this is an old slide already from our IPSTA conference. It used to be that you could select between the 2.9 and the 3.0 APRX. You'll notice when you download the new tool, you're only going to see the version 3.0. So go to that folder full of information that you get from the tool, and you're just going to see that APRX that's 3.0. Open that up. And in the table of contents, you're going to see a couple of tables to start off with, and that's going to be the first part that you do with the legacy tool. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So the first step in the whole workflow is the layer mapping table. If you have a previous version of the configuration table GDB from all of the files that you had from the tool the last time, that's going to be the easiest way to go. Load in your configuration table from the last time you did this. If you are brand new to running the tool, see if the person who did this previously has old files somewhere where you can load in what they were using for their configuration table, because that will save you a lot of time. So there are two tables. The layer mapping table is one that you do need to fill out, whether you're following the next-gen format or not. Let's go to the next slide, and I've got an example of a layer mapping table here. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like filling this layer mapping table out if you are following the next-gen format. If you could advance one. So the source layer name is what the layer is called in your master data. In this case, it's address points. The destination layer is the same, it's address points. So this is what it's going to look like if your master data does not match the next-gen format. So if you can go ahead one, source layer name here is center lines compared to the destination layer road center line. So basically what this is doing is it's setting up the framework for the tool to figure out, when I'm loading this into the standard format, where am I going to find this data? So this is just telling the data or the tool, if I'm looking for road center lines, it's in a layer called center lines. You can also do this for fields. So if your field name in your master data does not match what the standard is looking for, in this case, the standard is calling it postal code left right. And in this master data, it's zip left right. So again, just telling the tool where to find the data that it's looking for when it's loading things. The domain mapping table is kind of similar. Again, this is going to help you if your data is not natively in the next-gen format. Some of you I know have data where you can't make changes to the master data. And so this is a kind of a workaround to load it into the next-gen format on the fly when you are uploading to the state. So there are some fields in the state standards where there are specific ways that you need to spell things out. So I've got a few examples here. If you abbreviate the name Mount Sterling, the city names in the state standards do have a very specific way that they need to be spelled out. And in this particular case, Mount needs to be spelled out completely. And so putting that in your domain mapping table will just tell the tool, okay, if you see MT Sterling, translate that to Mount Sterling. If you abbreviate things differently, if you have something that is only abbreviated and you need it spelled out in the next-gen street names, these are just some of the examples of what you might do. And I've got an example of what that looks like on the next slide. Okay, so again, we've got the source layer name, that's the master data that is on my side. The source attribute, that's what I'm seeing in my data. The destination attribute, that's what it should be when it gets loaded into the master data. And it tells the tool what field I want that in. So this is the legacy street type. Okay, so that's all the background information. That's like just setting the stage for what the tool is going to be doing. So step 2 is creating a data model. What this means is it's just creating a blank geodatabase in the state standard. Everything is set up exactly the way that it's supposed to be in the standard format. It has a very specific way that it is naming this GDB. It's going to have your agency name, the date that you're working on this, and the version of the tool that you're using. Don't change that, just leave it the way it is, and then it will work with the tool. Okay, so step 3, the target geodatabase model. This is the blank geodatabase that just was created in the previous step. Now we're going to load the master data from your end into that blank GDB so that your master data is in the state standard format. So for each one of those required layers, you're going to put in, you're going to select that in the input source feature class, and then tell the tool where it's loading it. So in this particular example, address points, the master data is matching what the standard name is as well. So so we're going to load the address points, run that, load the ESB layers, run that, load the PSAP. Once you've got all of those loaded, you're going to go on to the next step. So again, you select this copy that you just loaded everything into. You're going to click run. It's going to run a bunch of QA, QC checks on your data. So when you get to this point, when it has completed that, there's going to be 2 places to check for errors. The obvious place is going to be the error inspector, the topology error inspector. That's going to pop up right away when it's done with everything. And so everybody notices that one. The one that sometimes people don't notice is the error report table. And that is going to be in your table of contents. You're going to have to go back over there and scroll down to the bottom. There's going to be a table that's added to your map called the error report table, and that will talk about different attribute errors. So make sure that you check both of those spots, and I'll show some examples of both kinds of errors that you're going to see there. So topology error inspector, this is looking for geometry errors. So road dangles where your road doesn't quite connect to anything, or it goes over a little bit too far. I'll show you what that looks like. Gaps and overlaps in your polygon layers, things like that. Make sure that you fix these not only in the map that is up right in front of you, but also in your master data. Remember that you just loaded all of your master data into a separate GDB, and that's what's in the map right now. So if you just fix what's in the map right now, you're not fixing those errors in your master data as well. So make sure that you get it in both spots so that you're not correcting this every single time you load. Yeah. Okay, so a few examples of some of the kinds of errors that you might see. So this would be a road dangle. You notice that it doesn't snap directly to that road. It doesn't make a nice, neat T at the intersection. It just goes over just a little bit. You want to make sure that that snaps right to the road intersection. Go ahead. In all the polygon layers for your ESBs, you want to make sure that you don't have any gaps. There shouldn't be any holes in your coverage. Every spot in your PSAP should be covered by a law response or a fire response. Everything that you submit should be inside the provisioning boundary. So if you have any roads that overlap outside of your provisioning boundary, it's going to mark that as an error. So trim those off before you submit. I think I've got one more. So overlaps also, you don't want to have those in your ESBs. If a call comes in, it should drop down on your ESB layer and just find one. It shouldn't have 2 ESB response areas overlapping in one spot. So that error report table, that is going to cover more attribute kinds of errors. And just got a few examples here. There's a lot of different things that you might see in here. But here are a few common ones. Duplicate address points. That's going to be points that have the exact same address. So down on the table at the bottom, you see that we've got a couple that have the exact same address, 225 North Stand Street, Bluffs, Illinois. I would want to go back and take a look at those two address points and see, is one of those have the wrong number? Is one supposed to be 227 instead? Is that just an error that way? Is one of them supposed to have a unit number? Maybe one is apartment B. Maybe one is 225A North Stanton Street. So you want to correct those for sure. If you go back quick. Yeah, thank you. So just a couple of other kinds of things that you might see. If there's a required field, you want to make sure that this table will show if there's a required field and you didn't have a value in there. Any problems with the domain values. So if there's a specific way that something needs to be formatted in a field, this will tell you if you are not following that. Go ahead. Okay, once you've made all those corrections, there's a revalidation process. One thing that you might notice when you're going right before you run the revalidation process is that there's a little checkbox underneath there for connection line. We didn't notice until we did the presentation for IPSTA that it says connection line required, and it's not required actually. So you do not need to run this, but it is a nice check to run once in a while. It compares your address points to your road center lines and finds discrepancies between those two. So it's a good thing to run, to take a look at. Not required. It does take a little bit of time to run. So especially if you are short on time, you don't need to run that. Okay, and once it's done the revalidation process, go ahead and take a look at your error report table. That should be updated. Also take a look at your contribution status table. That will be a new table that's in your map. And take a look and see if there's anything under status that says rejected. If it says rejected, you're not going to be able to submit your data. You're going to need to correct any errors in those layers before you can submit. Yes, and so this is what the final submission screen is going to look like. And again, if you are an Intrado customer, make sure that you always check the box to upload to Intrado as well, because you always want to make sure that the copy that's in Intrado is matching what is on the hub.
All right, so I'm back. I will talk about the new workflow and what it does and why. So we mentioned before that your data must exactly match the NINA version 1 schema, but the tool does allow you to submit a single layer of data. What the tool does is it downloads your last submission and it's going to preserve any unchanged layers. So a typical workflow, you probably are just going to update address points and center lines, but your polygon boundaries don't change that much. So it's going to compare the local edits in your input data with those of the downloaded data set, and it's going to use that NGUID field to do that. Then it only publishes true changes. It basically, takes all of the unchanged data from your download and it takes all of the changed data and then it puts them together and then submits that back up to both the hub and your EZNet provider. The new tool has fewer prompts. It should be faster, but provided you have the exact schema and your NGUIDs are compliant. Next screen. So you still need the layer mapping table. Everybody needs that, whether you're running the legacy or the new workflow. And you need to have bare minimum 1 line per layer. The tool is going to download your last submission, and it's going to run that feature change detection, keying on both the geometry and a select group of attribute fields. If it detects a change in either one of those, then it's going to say, oh, this feature is changed, or maybe it's a new feature, or maybe it's an old feature. And then it's only going to act on those things that have changed. You are still going to get your topology and attribute error tables. Those are still used. You're still going to get those in a later step. And then you're still going to have to revalidate and submit. Next screen. So the tool starts out and it asks you to load the layer mapping table. So similar to the legacy workflow, hopefully you saved, if nothing else from your tool folder, save the configuration table.gdb somewhere else so that on your next tool run, you can point to that. And those layer mapping and domain mapping tables, once you get into the workflow and you've done this several times, those also stay pretty static. So you can probably keep a copy and keep reusing it over and over. All right. Then the next step is you're going to supply your agency name and your ISP hub username and password, and it's going to log into the hub and download your last submission. Next screen. So in this example, I'm going to update only address points and road center lines because, like I said, the boundaries just don't change all that much. So I'm pointing here. Let's see, at the very top, I've got my input database, and then I've checked a box for address points, and then it's automatically found the address points layer because it's following a standard naming convention. And then similarly, I've checked the box for road centerline, and it's automatically found the road centerline layer. So next dialog box. Let's see, yes. So it's going to run the feature change detection, and then it's going to output a new table called change detection table to your contents pane. So at this point, you're going to want to switch over to the contents and open up that table. So next screen. And if you don't have a table, then possibly there were no changes detected. If you're expecting that, great. But if you did make changes and you don't see this table, then red flags should start going off and you want to think, oh, what happened here? Now let's look at this change detection table. So there's several columns of data here. We've got the feature class name, the record ID, that's the NGUID, the change type, and then the change description. And those two columns, those last two, are telling me what's happened here. So in this example, there are several old features that are being removed. Now that might be fine, but look down at the bottom in that red box. Notice that there are 1,262 items in this change detection table. At this point, I would say something's wrong. Maybe I didn't make that many changes. Maybe I only changed like 5 features last month. Why are there 1,262 selected? So this is a point where this looks concerning to me. I might stop the process and go back and look at the data, looking at my master data, the previous download, and say, what happened here? So in this case, for this demo, I deleted a whole community worth of address points. So if that had been me, fat fingering something, hitting delete when I didn't intend to, this is a good point where you would catch this and you'd probably stop the process and figure out what's wrong and fix it. Okay, next screen. So now this is just Peter Schoenfield never has any luck trying to restart the tool from the middle of the process. So for some reason, I always end up having to restart from a fresh copy of the tool. That's why it's good to keep a backup of your zip file with that tool. It does, as the tool progresses, it does make changes inside of that tool folder. So rather than being encumbered by something that you may have messed up in the previous run, that's why you sometimes just need to wipe the slate clean and start with a fresh download of the tool. So let's say I've gone through, I found my problem, I fixed the problem, and I'm rerunning the tool. So now notice that these text boxes are automatically filled in by the tool. Don't change those values. The new tool is smarter now, and it's going to pre-populate this data. You do not have to change it. You probably should not change it. Just leave the values as is. Next tool, or screen. So now the tool is going to revalidate my data. And again, it's going to reissue that change detection table. So you would want to go back, look at that table. And in my case, I would want to see that I have a smaller number of records. Again, don't change the text boxes. Let the tool fill them in as needed. Next screen. So the remaining steps here are exactly the same as the legacy workflow. It's going to go through, it's going to do your topo edits. You're going to have a chance to look at the error table that Renee talked about. The other key thing is when you get to this point in either workflow, legacy or new tool, after it's done the topo, after you've dealt with that topo error table, you need to save your edits. So there will be a point where you've got to go and click that little save icon and save your edits before you continue. Again, don't change the values in the text box. And at the moment, it's going to check that connection line require box. But as Renee said, this is probably something you just want to do occasionally, as it will slow down the processing time. So at this point, uncheck that box. I would hope at some future point we can get Esri to reverse that so that this box is not checked by default, and we'll clean up that language to be a little bit more make it sound optional rather than required. All right, next screen. All right, upload and aftercare. So before you submit your data, make sure you have fixed all errors, both topo and going to that error table. Upload via the tool only. Do not send data directly to Intrado. And Intrado, if you contact them and say, hey, Intrado, I've got data, I couldn't get the tool work, but I need to give you the data, they're going to say, no, sorry, you need to get the tool working and submit via that method. This keeps the hub data and the phone company data in sync. And there's a reason why, and we'll talk about that in a bit. After your upload, if you're an Intrado customer, and I believe InDigital is going to start doing the same thing, there will be an error report that you need to log into Intrado's portal or perhaps a portal from InDigital and look at that error report to see if there are any other lingering issues that you need to fix for the benefit of your EZNet provider. The recommended submission cadence, if you're a large entity, you should probably be submitting monthly. And I work for a large entity, and I know we were constantly getting address changes every, at least once a week. So mid-sized, you can probably get by with a quarterly update. And if you're smaller or rural area, you could probably get by doing it every 6 months. But warning, everyone is going to need to reload their data when we get to the NINA version 3 cutover. So be forewarned, we're anticipating that to be sometime in the first quarter of next year. It'll probably come down from Alicia that, hey, everybody, you got to run the new tool and get your data uploaded. But you can always run the tool more frequently. If you come by a new address, new subdivision has gone in, and you just uploaded last week, you're probably going to want to get those addresses in there and get it run. So you're always free to run it more often. And again, make sure you make a backup of your configuration table.gdb so you can use it during your next tool run. Next slide. Key attributes that you need to get right. So agency ID, that's important. And let's say your email from your employer changes, the part to the right of the ampersand or the @ sign. Don't just go change this on your own. This is something you have to coordinate with the ISP. You would let them know that your entity is changing your email and your agency ID needs to change. You're going to work out what that new ID is going to be with the ISP, and then things have to change at the back end in the hub, and they'll probably have to get Esri involved to make the change. And then you'll get a message from Alicia or Cindy saying, okay, it's changed. Now go ahead and run the tool with your new agency ID. Actually, it's probably also going to need, as you saw at the start, when an agency ID changes, there's going to have to be an update made to the tool. So that'll probably force Esri's hand in issuing a new tool just to take in your domain agency ID update. The NGUID, this is important, especially if you're using the new tool. this has to be stable across submissions because that's one of the key fields that it looks at to determine if your record changed. So if you cannot guarantee that your NGUID stays stable from one submission to the next, then you probably don't want to use the new tool. You probably want to use the legacy tool. If you are using the new tool, that NGUID ID has to follow a particular format. The prefix part has to have some it's alphanumeric, has to have some characters at the start that are all uppercase, and they're listed there for the different layers. Then there's a series of numbers, then the @ symbol, and then your agency ID. Now, when we get to version 3 of the NINA spec, this is going to change. They've actually broadened the types of data, types of structure that you can use for the NGUID. So we'll deal with that when we get to it, but that's what's coming here. The PSAP service URI, that is something also that is provided by the ISP. Please don't invent values there. Contact them and they will get you the correct value to use. Also, the state requirement is that you must supply a zip code and a postal and MSAG community on all of your data sets that have it. Why? Because the ISP uses this hub data to portion out your 911 funding. So they do that based on the zip code and the postal MSAG community. If you're not filling that data in, you're shortchanging yourself. You're possibly not getting all the funding that you deserve. So make sure you update that. And this is why we want to make sure that every time you submit to the EZNet provider, you also submit to the hub. Street naming conventions. So the new NINA specs have mandated that everything gets spelled out. So North, Court, they're fully spelled out. The legacy fields, however, still use abbreviated values, North or CT. Now, one thing I want to point out, notice that North and Court here are uppercase. I think there's a little bit of wiggle room in the next coming spec where it could actually be proper case. So keep an eye on that. We'll go over that, and that might possibly be a change that comes along with version 3. And again, if you are an AT&T Entrada user, there's one thing you can do. There's a field called exception. And if you have a road center line, this particularly impacts road center lines. If you have a road center line that is outside of your boundary, or it runs right along your boundary, you can code that exception field for being outside authoritative boundary. Now, why would you have a road center line that's outside your provisioning boundary? Because we just said your provisioning boundary must contain all of the data you're submitting. Well, you might have address points that are based on that road center line where the address point actually falls inside your jurisdiction, but the road that they're based on is outside. That's the one case where you are allowed to have a road center line that's outside your boundary. So you would code that OAB, and then hopefully it won't show up in the Intrado error report. I don't know if InDigital has anything like that. Yeah, next slide. So again, provisioning boundary, these are things that tend to bite newcomers. So your provisioning boundary must cover all of your submitted data. The outer edge of all 5 polygon layers must exactly match. So that's vertex for vertex. All of those other layers, PSAP, fire law, EMS, must match the provisioning boundary, or you risk running into a topological error, either from Esri or from your EZNet provider. This one always stumps people, especially if you're new to this process. If you only handle fire and not police, or police and not fire, you still have to submit all of the layers that are under that provisioning boundary. So that means I might have to pick up the phone. If I'm only doing fire but not police, I might have to call my neighbor and say, hey, neighbor, send me something from your territory because I need to submit that. Or neighbor, since you're submitting this area, I'm going to send you my address points and center lines for you to submit. Again, work with your neighbors, especially in those boundary questions. Now, because we are we're already into this project a couple years. Most of these polygon boundaries are pretty much set in stone. So if you're a new person and you're looking at this boundary saying, well, I don't dispatch for police here or fire, I'm just going to change my provisioning boundary. No. Those are set in stone. It's been worked out by your predecessor and your neighbors. So if you think there's a problem, you need to talk to your neighbors and find out what's going on before you make any changes. If you do have an annexation and you're going to change the provisioning boundary and all the other boundaries, you have to work with your neighbor and the phone company, and you all have to agree on a date when you're going to submit that data. So not just you, but your neighbor as well. All right, next screen. All right, so I think we're at the end here. Hopefully we've helped you, given you a little more information on how to choose the legacy workflow versus the new workflow. Helped you determine how to fix your data. And remember, fix your data in the master, not just in the data that you're working on, which is going to get uploaded to the hub. And then please talk to your neighbors about any boundary issues. I think that's it. So I will open that up to any questions you might have.
All right, questions for Peter or Renee? Let's see what I've got in the chat here. Hold on. Let's see, starting with 5.1. Let me expand this a minute here. So the question is starting with 5.1. I lost it just a minute. The tool is tackling whether PSAPs are using the new or legacy workflow when they submit. So there should be good stats on how many people are using each now. Is that correct, Peter and Renee?
Yes, and so far, I think more people are using the legacy workflow than the new, but there is a small body of users who are working with the new.
All right, so that question, is there a link you could share to Nina version 3.0 so we know that it's what's coming? Let me see what I can find on that. The last update on that is it was out for public comment on just the last range of whatever changes there were. So I'll do a little research, and if I can find something that's reasonable to share, I'll send it out to you.
Yes, and also somebody up above, GeoVis said duplicate address points with the same XY coordinate, but different attributes are not an error. Yes, I think that's correct.
All right. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to raise or get clarification from Peter and Renee?
Yes, I think the PowerPoint, Cindy always sends the PowerPoint out. Did you record this audio as well?
I did. So that takes usually a day or so to get that from, the web dev team, if you will, or the WebEx team. So yes, I will, once I know that that's posted out on the website, I will send that notification out along with the slide deck so that you have access to the recording if you're interested in that. But yes. All right, any other questions? Any other topics to discuss that we haven't discussed today that we want to bring forth? All right, then that being the case, Renee and Peter, thank you so much. I learned a lot from this presentation, and I'm sure a lot of the data maintainers have as well. Next call will be December 18th at 10 a.m. So enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.